Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, a judge rules that the state must immediately boost school funding. We'll take a look at Arizona history through stereographic images, and we'll see how teenagers are helping others learn today's technology. Those stories next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. A judge ruled today that the state must immediately pay Arizona schools $317 million as a first payment to make up for over $1 billion frozen by the legislature during the recession. Howard Fisher of Capital Media Services is covering the story. Howie, good to have you here. This is a little bit complicated. We've talked about it before, but basically what the judge said is, my earlier decision, do it now.
Do it now. The state had come in and asked for a delay. The backstory on this is Arizona voters in 2000 said, we're going to increase our sales tax by 0.6 cents to 5.6%. And we want to have you adjust state aid to inflation every year, 2% or inflation, whichever is less. No problem. Till 2009 comes along, the state's economy goes in the tank, and they say, we really can't afford that. And it continued in 10, 11, and 12, and the school districts sued, and they said, wait a second, what the voters said is what the voters meant. And of course, there were arguments about, well, you can't force us to do anything, and it really doesn't mean what the voters say. And finally, last year, the state Supreme Court said, you're owed the money, send it back to the judge. Judge said last month, here's the amount of money. The state came in and said, well, wait, we're not quite ready for that yet. And the judge said today, no. The kids need the money. It's time.
And we're talking, this is serious buckage here. We're talking $317, an incrementally up from there for 5 years. You're talking well over $1 billion here. Yes. And are we even at the back payment? I mean, this is to get everything up to where it should have been. You still got those 4 years when you didn't do anything.
Exactly. Just to be where you should have been, if you rebase it, so to speak, $317 million. It's about $230 a student. Then another $320 next year, and $323 the year after that, and on and on. And as you point out, that doesn't even count the part that the judge is going to hear in October. While they were messing around at the Capitol, about $1.3 billion that should have been paid to schools was not. Now the state is saying, well, they can't deal with it now, and the schools are saying, well, of course, we're behind in books, we're behind in repairs, we're behind in fixtures, and we can use the money. So we're talking some major payout here. And the issue is, where's the money? Now, this year's not a problem. We've got about $450 million in the rainy day fund, so we can clearly deal with that. What happens next year? They were counting on that $450 to balance next year's budget. You take out 300 and some million out of that, plus you add another 320 million to that next year, all of a sudden, we're back in the hole.
Well, and what is a timetable here? Because I know the legislatures, I know there's going to be an appeal for it. There has to be an appeal for this. The governor's already been on record as saying this would be, her words, devastating to the state of Arizona, having all this money go into education. Be that as it may, the fact is, as far as the budget is concerned, it is devastating. I mean, this turns things upside down.
Oh, it definitely does. But the question becomes why? Very clearly, some of the folks are saying, number one, you have an obligation. Raise taxes. Now, that's a little difficult in Arizona. You need a 2/3 vote of the House and Senate. The only last time we had a tax increase was temporary, and the voters did. Number two, cut some of the tax breaks. We have cut corporate income taxes by 30%. And we're phasing that in. We've accelerated depreciation, done a whole other series of business tax breaks under the premise we're going to cut our way out of the recession. Well, I've looked at the jobs figures lately, and that may not be working.
It's not
So
happening.
The question is, should we maybe reconsider those?
Well, and I know some lawmakers are probably wondering, should we reconsider an appeal, considering you better get a handle on this relatively soon. You can fast track it to the courts, you can hope, but eventually you got to come up with these numbers and balance this stuff soon.
Well, somehow there's this idea, if it's like I have a 2-year-old grandchild. She doesn't understand tomorrow. She understands now. at the risk of equating 90 lawmakers with my 2-year-old grandchild, it's, well, if we don't have to do it now, it doesn't count. And maybe it's someone else's problem down the road.
Real quickly, when we talked about this before, there had been efforts by the education community to work something out with the legislature. Were there not? And how far did they go?
Well, there was an offer on the table saying, look, let's just rebase the state aid, that $317 million we're talking about, and we will forego that $1.3 billion. Well, there were a few talks, but I think the legislature said no because we think we can kill the whole thing.
Yes.
Well, you can see how well that worked out. I think what's going to happen is the lawyers are going to sit down from both sides and figure out what's the risk. For the schools, it's the risk the judge will say in October, you don't deserve the $1.3 billion. For the state, it's the risk that she will say you do deserve it. And that's the nature of deals that are always made in civil cases.
And again, how do you appeal what is basically a failure to honor a ballot measure? I mean, the voters made it quite clear they wanted X. The legislature did Y. How do you appeal that?
Well, there are two theories to that. Number one is the argument that somehow the words don't quite mean, and you put 3 attorneys in a room and I'll give you 6 opinions. The other is a more interesting constitutional question. Can the courts order the legislature to do anything? Now, courts cannot order a tax to be imposed. They can't order the state to sell a building. Mm-hmm. The assumption is the legislature will follow what the courts want, and I don't think anybody wants that constitutional crisis. But there are options. For example, 20 years ago, when the Supreme Court found the school funding system unconstitutional, they didn't tell the legislature to spend more. They said, if you don't do it, we will cut all state aid to schools and we'll find another way of doing it. So there are always options out there.
There are options out there, and there is a governor's race. Real quickly, this is going to fall into the lap of some lucky new governor, isn't it?
Oh, yes, and I think a lot of them are wondering, do I really want this gig?
Howie, good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Jeremy Rowe is a photographer who also collects historic stereographic images of Arizona. The result is Arizona history from a unique visual perspective. Joining us now is Jeremy Rowe. It's good to see you again. We got a lot of pictures to get to, but before we get going here, stereographs. You've got like a historic model of, what are we talking about here?
They're cards that have 2 images on it. It was made with a camera, which I'll show you in a few moments, that has 2 images, one left eye and one right eye image.
Yes.
And by keeping the images separated and viewing them, so your left eye sees the left image, right eye sees the right image, your brain puts it together and gives a 3D image. It was the first real popular media in the 19th century, in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And it gives you a really immersive 3D view of reality. It's just amazing to think of people that had never seen anything but pictures on the wall, paintings and so on, to all of a sudden have an immersive 3D photographic environment.
Well, I remember as a kid we had those little things where Viewmasters, yeah, same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was the commercial version. This is the earlier 19th century version. You can see there are 2 pictures, a left and right picture. There are 2 lenses, left and right picture. You hold them up, focus, and you see the image in 3D.
And that's what people were, let me get a hold of this thing. Yeah. That's what people were doing, huh? I mean, they were just basically...
You'd have a stereoscope in the parlor, you'd have a little stack of stereo views. If you traveled, you'd send views back to your family. Your family would have stereo views that they'd exchange with friends. People would come over and sit around the fireplace or the kerosene lamp and look at views. Even in places like Arizona, out in the Tules here, you find stereo views. So.
Well, let's talk about Arizona now. Let's start with your book now. You've got a new book of a collection of these things, correct?
Yes, it's sort of the history of stereo in Arizona and the history of Arizona from a stereo perspective. So it's sort of a blend of the two. It's 260 images, about 307 pages, with the story of how stereo was formed, different people that made stereo photographs, the photographers, sort of biographies of them, and then a checklist of views, so showing where they were taken, how they were made, what they documented, and using that as a resource for looking at history a little bit differently.
And I think we have a cover shot of the book. There were a couple of guys, I think, on the cover of that. Who are these fellows over there on the left?
One is Powell, who was the explorer that explored the Grand Canyon in the 1870s, and I don't have the name of the other person, unfortunately. The image in the lower corner is Eaton and Bailey's Mercantile, which is a dry goods store in Globe, one of the earliest images of Globe extant. And stereos are interesting because they're the first images that were made of Arizona in any mass or number. And they tended to be very small cameras, very easy to carry cameras, and so they made a lot of images in places that weren't normally documented.
Yeah.
And many of the images you see in Arizona history books come from stereo, but nobody knows that. So
Interesting.
they've been taken from one side and
They just
printed
take-
as opposed to seeing the
yeah.
stereo. So understanding how they were made, where they were made, and why gives you more perspective to understand the content of the image.
And I think our next photo kind of shows the stereographic camera, at least a historic one.
Yeah, that's from about the 1880s.
Yeah.
The camera has the two lenses, as you see. They focus separately and they actually expose separately, and they would, a good photographer would actually overexpose one side, underexpose the other slightly, because your brain would take the detail from one and detail from the other and put them together and make a broader tonal range for the photograph. So as a way to make the limited tonal range of the photos extended by using that technique.
interesting?
And the camera's, that's about a 5:7 negative size. The thing in the foreground with the two circles is actually a shutter that slips over the lenses and has a flap that you flip up and down to make the exposure.
My goodness.
And then the piece in the back is a plate holder. You'd have a glass plate that you'd make the images on, and you'd have to make an original negative for each image. You'd have to take a glass plate, pour collodion, which is a thick viscous material, pour that on, flow it, sensitize the plate, put it in the back of the camera while it was wet, expose it, process it, dry it, pack it before you could go back. And each negative had to have its own glass plates. You had to carry all the material with you into the field.
And I want to ask about, because our next photograph shows, I think from the Powell expedition, and we see the guy out there, and he's got a lot of stuff. That must have been quite the burden to be carrying around.
It was at least 150 pounds, maybe 175 pounds for 12 images, even if you're doing very small number of images. You could scrape the emulsion off and reuse the glass plate, but also if you drop the glass plate, that image was gone. So there are stories of photographers who worked in the field and had a burro stumble or a horse drop a box, and they lost their entire output from a period of time. But there's a little dark tent in the back. They called the process wet plate because you had to process before the collodion dried. And in places like the East Coast, where it was fairly humid, it was a fairly long exposure time and a long time to be able to do the processing. In Arizona, where it was dry and hot, the collodion dried very quickly. And once it dries, the negative is not usable. So you had to carry water with you. You had to process very quickly. You were in a little dark tent in the sun, baking as you're trying to do this, and you're working with gun cotton and ether, so you had ether vapors coming in. So it was a very rigorous process.
It was like a psychedelic experience. I think the earliest photo now that you've shown us is this next one of these are Papago warriors, correct?
Right. Yeah, they were taken from the southern part of the state up to the northeastern part of the state to deal with the Navajo. The Anglo population used the tribes against each other, some of the tribal factions, to moderate the area. So the Navajo in the north were moved to Bosque Redondo, and they used Papago warriors to help package and move the Navajo from northeastern Arizona into New Mexico.
And you're talking 1865 circa.
Right. This is just after the Civil War cleared. During the Civil War, a lot of the military was pulled out of Arizona, so it was very dangerous, and not a lot of people were here. As the war wore down, soldiers came back in, the Apaches were sort of put back, and people came back. This is one of the mining communities in southern Arizona that the explorers came back to.
Arivaca. Next photograph is of an Apache agent. This is on the San Carlos Reservation. The photographer is Dudley Flanders.
Dudley P. Flanders.
Excuse me.
He was one of the first people to come to Arizona to actually make images to sell. This was 1874. He was a photographer from Los Angeles, and he made an expedition, came across through Kingman, Camp Beale Springs, down to Prescott, across into the Verde Valley, down through Maricopa Wells, because there was nothing in Phoenix at that point. Maricopa Wells was the biggest stop on the route, to Tucson, and then photographed in San Carlos.
And you mentioned Tucson. Our next photograph is of Congress Street. If you're familiar with Congress Street, we are looking west here, and oh, does that look different?
Yep. Very typical western town, false front buildings. It's kind of hard to see in this, but there's a mortar and pestle in the back for the pharmacy. One of 2 studios in the territory during this time was in Tucson. One was in Prescott, one was in Tucson. And that was sort of the nexus for where people would make photographs and produce the photographs during that time.
Look at that. And the next photograph is interesting as well because it's in Yuma. It's a steam barge, and these things actually went inland in Arizona, correct?
They went up the Colorado and down the Gila and carried a lot of the mining equipment during that time period before the railway was in place. This is sort of an interesting image because in the background you can just barely see it, but that's the railway bridge that was just completed in the back, and that sort of drove the stake through the heart of the poor paddle wheel steamers.
So the future and the past right there in one shot.
You got it.
Vulture Mine in Wickenburg circa 1881 or so, and Vulture City was larger than Phoenix when this photograph was taken.
Right, early 1880s. This is a very rich mine south of Wickenburg, and you can see also this has some of the residue from being hot. You can see the modeling in the sky. That's the collodion having a problem with the heat here. So this is shot during the time where it was so hot that it was difficult, and you see a difference in exposure between the 2 sides of the image as well.
Okay, next shot is of downtown Phoenix, the corner of Washington and Montezuma Street.
It's about 4th Avenue, roughly.
I was going to say, where is Montezuma Street? 4th Avenue, huh?
Yeah.
And that's Washington. Look at
That's
that.
Washington. That's the northeast corner, I believe. The business was only there for about 2 years. And again, these photographs are really great documents because they're businesses that came and went. They're things that transitioned and changed. Were only there for a short period of time.
Yeah.
We find a photograph is the only record that really shows what's going on. You can see in detail on the viewer, you can see the name of the business on the side, go back to City Directory, find the years of operation, and nail down when this was taken.
Oh, that's fantastic. We have some Apache artifacts from the Globe area. It was interesting to read what you wrote about this in the sense of this American Indian stuff, very big back east, these artifacts and things.
This is actually a collection that they used the stereo view to try and sell the collection to a collector in Massachusetts. So they brought all the material in, photographed it in Globe, Arizona, and then sent the card to Massachusetts.
Yeah,
And see, it's all Apache material.
There's,
There's
that's the real deal there, huh? Speaking of the real deal, if you're up on Tempe Butte and you're looking toward Phoenix these days, it looks a lot different than this.
a bit different than this. Yes, this is about 1885, looking towards Phoenix. The new railway bridge is in place there. This is where Hayden's Ferry was when they would cross the Salt River using the ferry boat. And Hayden's Mill is in the corner just below, and then Montes La Casa Vieja, the buildings that have turned into that. So there's a few things that are still there.
Isn't that's Montes over there, huh? And that's the Hayden Flour Mill right there to the right.
Just below.
And somewhere in the distance in the future would be Phoenix.
Yep.
Not so much right there, but in the future. That is fantastic. Speaking of towns, Tombstone, I think we got a shot of a parade in Tombstone. And this tough town was already kind of turning into a tourist town by the early 1900s.
Yeah, the floods had taken the mines out. The silver mines are very wealthy for a period of time, but the water was flowing in the mines. It was very difficult for them to continue. So they were transitioning from being a mining community to something else. And tourism was one of the areas that they sort of pulled together. This is the Modoc stage, the stagecoach that was sort of a famous historic stagecoach, and they used it for parades, for a variety of reunions and other sorts of things to help gear up that tourism and tourist activity there.
I want to end on just a fantastic shot here of the Grand Canyon. And this is, first of all, it's hand-colored, correct?
Yes.
And look at what he's doing. I mean, where's the safety precaution here?
Pre-OSHA, all the safety factors at the canyon. But they would hand color these with oils or watercolors on occasion. The coloring is beautiful in the viewer.
It is.
But trying to do something dynamic. It's interesting. This is sort of a later view. The earliest images that were seen by many people in Arizona were the Grand Canyon survey, the Wheeler and Powell surveys, and then you go sort of full circle to the 1920s and 30s, and the canyon was still a very popular subject, and you see a different style of things, sort of drugstore cowboys, posed on the edge.
And when you say hand-colored, that is both sides, hand-colored.
And if there's a difference between the colors, you get a little bit of a flickering in the viewer. They take advantage of that sometimes.
As far as these old photos, how many more of these things are out there?
It's really hard to say. When I first started working on the book, they thought there were 200 or 300 Arizona stereos total. I've got about 4,000 titles that I've pulled together so far. So there's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 10, 11,000 views out there, just as a rough guess. Millions and millions of views are made, but Arizona was sort of a difficult place to photograph and not heavily photographed during this era.
We've got about a minute left here. I got to ask you, this sounds like a labor of love. Why do you do this?
I found a couple of photographs at Park and Swap many years ago, and that sort of set the hook, and trying to find out more about the photos, how they were taken, how they were made, what they mean. Everyone's got a story in it, and as you start spending time with them, you start pulling more and more of the story out of the photographs, and it's a lot of fun. We're doing a meeting about stereo research and stereo photography, both contemporary and historic photography, on August 30th at 1:30 in the afternoon at Art Intersection in Gilbert. If I can give a quick plug for that.
You
if
bet.
people are interested, if you'd like to stop by, we'll have both vintage views and contemporary views, even things like a digital 3D camera that you can use to make digital 3D that you can view on your TV set or iPad or others. So it's
All right.
pretty amazing.
August 30th, where's this again?
Art Intersection in Gilbert.
All right, Jeremy, it's always a pleasure. Great stuff.
Thank you very much.
In tonight's edition of Arizona Technology and Innovation, we look at a program that involves teenagers passing on their tech knowledge to others. Producer Christina Estes has the story.
Mission 1 is the first game you'll be playing.
You're doing so far so good right now.
On the 4th floor at Burton Bar Central Library in Phoenix,
Are you guys enjoying you guys' game?
Anthony Jocelyn and his fellow interns lead a class on video game design.
You can have him, do sit-ups, you can have him do double jump, you can have him talk, you can have him think. Basically, it's whatever you want him to do, he'll do it if it has that function available.
Thanks to government grants, Phoenix hired 13 high school interns to support classes in the Maker Space, also known as Mach 1.
Mach 1 stands for Makers, Artists, Crafters, and Hackers. And we do everything from paper engineering to science experiments to computer classes and tech classes.
Youth Services Manager Terry Ann Lawler says there's a special focus on science, technology, engineering, and math, often called STEM.
When they graduate from high school nowadays, need to be prepared to go on to college, or they need to be prepared to work in the STEM industry. The nice thing about classes in the library that are STEM-based is that they're ungraded. There's not any pressure for them to perform. It's more of a play-like atmosphere.
Playing with the 3D printer is pretty popular.
It's an arm clip-on band, like hero type things like that. And we're actually, people actually call and ask if we can actually make them things from here, like from our 3D printer and stuff like that. Our ultimate goal by the end of this year is to actually make a small model house, make maybe 10 feet by 10 feet house, basically from just our 3D printer that we have here.
Oh, 2 more. There you go.
From working here, they get a lot out of it. They get customer service skills, they get tech skills, they get troubleshooting skills, they learn how to work in a team.
Good job.
Ask the interns what they've learned, and a theme quickly emerges.
I have a lot more patience than I thought I had.
I have more patience than I probably thought I did, or that I gave myself credit for. Because this job, when it comes to, like I said, teaching older people things, you have to be patient, because sometimes they have the attitude like they're willing to learn, and then the other attitude when it's just like, hurry up and get me through what I need to do.
I've had adults come in and they'll be asking about the class, and when they find out that I'm the teacher, they always kind of look at me funny, like, oh, it's you. But it's really interesting getting to teach adults, just because you don't expect to have the roles reversed like that. But I guess in the world of technology, my generation's grown up used to a lot of these things, so the older generation is learning from us now.
We didn't find older people in this class. These students range from 6 to 16.
So now you have the choice to put that character in one of your games, and you can start making them.
When the internships end, Joel and Leah plan to attend college, while Anthony will enter the Army. He's already working out with his platoon and applying lessons he's learned at the library.
time is like, you know, really important in here and in the military because time, classes have to start, classes have to end, kids have to, you know, leave, come back, things like that. And it also makes me kind of aware of things at all times because when kids are here, I have to like be able to like watch them at peripheral vision, stuff like that, make sure they're not wandering off, or make sure, you know, make sure they're doing the right thing over here. You make sure like they're just like on task, things like that.
I guess still on the same level.
The library hopes to bring on new interns this fall, and it sounds like they'll have a tough act to follow.
I think that any one of my teens could be president, and I'd be happy about that.
And the Youth Services Manager says that they're always looking for adults to share what they've learned or volunteer to teach other STEM classes. Friday on Arizona Horizon, it's the Journalists Roundtable. We'll talk more about the court ruling that calls for an immediate boost in school funding, and we'll preview next week's primary election. That's Friday, 5:30 and 10 on the Journalists Roundtable. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.